The sponsor for today's podcast is Repower Daily Electrolytes. Hello, I'm Kieran O'Connor, and this is episode 17 of the Calculated Risks podcast. Today, we are joined by Oliver Smith. Oliver is the CTO of a Welsh-based consultancy called ScaleAround. Hello, Oliver. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast today.
Hi, Kieran. Nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
No worries. Thanks for coming. As always, I start with a gift, which is my book, which I'm sure you've been waiting for patiently.
I'll be starting a recruitment business in
Absolutely.
no
read
time
that.
now, so I'm now diversifying my organisation.
Definitely. And you've got some gifts from our sponsor there, some daily electrolytes and a new bottle, which I'm very interested to hear what your favourite flavour is tomorrow.
Well, I hear that they are the best electrolytes on the market.
Definitely.
So looking forward to
Thanks for promoting that.
Yeah. It's okay.
Well, we start the podcast the same way every time. We love to delve a little bit deeper into people's risks that they've taken in their career, and particularly like the first one they've ever taken. So thinking back to the beginning of your career, what was the first big risk that you took, and how did you feel about it at the time?
Well, I didn't take any risks, Kieran. So I was extremely risk averse. My parents were reasonably very risk averse. You get a job, you stay in the job, and you don't change jobs for as long as you can possibly sit in the same job effectively. I think my father had two jobs the entire time that since I was born and until his retirement, and my mother was in the health service. In terms of my risks, I think taking that first move out of what was a reasonably large company. So I started at Logica, and then I moved from there into a sort of smaller organisation that was where we were developing software for the actual organisation itself. And at the time, I remember my parents telling me, "That's a ridiculous move. You shouldn't do that." But it got me onto one of the first Scrum projects in the UK. It moved my career forwards, and frankly, I took 50% increase in salary as well at the same time. And so it was a very calculated risk. And if I think more about it, every time I've shifted job, there's been risk associated with that. And if you look at my CV, I've done quite a lot of different jobs. But the sort of big risk that we took was when we decided that we'd move from Wales, and I was doing a commute from the south coast into London. It used to take me about 2.5 hours to get to work and 2.5 hours to get home from work. And my daughter, I came home and we had a young child, and she was sitting on the stairs. I remember she was sitting on the stairs waiting for me to read her a bedtime story one day at about 8:30 at night when I walked through, and we decided that what we were doing was nuts, frankly, and we needed to shift. And so I was offered a job at a startup in Berlin, and I was offered a job here in Cardiff, or over in Cardiff rather, and that was a very big move. And within a month, we'd packed up all our stuff, we'd rented out our house, we'd rented a new house in Cardiff, which we then eventually bought. And we moved the family, and that was in terms of risk, was probably the biggest risk we've taken.
Yeah, moving the whole family, that is a big risk, which we'll come on to in a minute.
Yeah.
Fast forward to now in your career, I know that you've recently started ScaleAround not too long ago. So what's your relationship like to taking risks now? You've spent a long time in the industry.
I think as you get older, and you can see from my haircut that I've got a bit older, you understand the risk profile and you become more comfortable and confident. I mean, my view now is that I back myself to find another job, and I've never really been out of work. And so, if I back myself to find another job, then starting a technology consultancy, really and truthfully, isn't that much of a risk, providing you can get clients through the door and you can keep the ball from the door. And frankly, it's probably been the best risk that I've taken in my career. I'm not looking back. I don't intend to become an employee again anytime soon at this point.
And now a message from our sponsor, Repower Daily Electrolytes. Picture this, you're in the middle of a busy day, work deadlines, family chaos, but without realizing it, your brain is running on empty. Just a 1% drop in hydration can tank your focus, reaction time, even your mood. That's why Repower Daily Electrolytes created the ultimate hydration formula. Packed with the right electrolytes your brain craves. Forget plain water. Level up your energy, sharpen your mind, and feel alive again. Stay sharp, stay strong, and hydrate smarter with Repower Daily Electrolytes. And you can use our code PLACE10 to get 10% off your first order. Yeah, good. It sounds easy in theory, right? If you can get clients and you can do the work, that you should never be out of business. But I'm sure we'll come on to it. Sometimes it can be quite difficult to find new clients, but then also juggle managing existing clients and the chop and changing of them both.
Yeah, it's all about your network, right? In terms of finding clients, particularly at the level that ScaleAround operates at, because we're an executive consultancy. We're really about using our network, try to build those relationships, and then provide some assistance. And frankly, be in and then leave. And we use a network of associates in order to fulfill those clients. Now, I do quite a lot of the work myself with one of our main clients, but there's other clients, and we use a network of associates in order to service them. And they're trusted people that I've worked with before, and that really works very well.
Yeah, so let's go back to the early days then before we come on to ScaleAround. So I know you started out in QA very early on, but even before that, was it always technology that you knew was going to be your career, post-education?
This is going to sound ridiculous, but the way that I chose my degree course was I knew I wanted to stay local because we just introduced fees. I think I was the second year that went to university with fees. And so I opened the book at the computer science page for Sussex University. I closed my eyes, and I went like this, and I dropped my finger on the page, and I read computer science and artificial intelligence. I thought, that sounds impressive. I'll do that. And that's therefore what I put on my UCAS form. And that is how I ended up going to university where I went and doing what I did. So in terms of risk, you couldn't be more risky, but I just didn't know which course to choose from the myriad of courses that were out there. And it's worked out okay, albeit that I did AI when it wasn't sexy.
Yeah.
And it is now.
Yeah, well, that was my next question, I guess. So this was back in 2002?
Yes, yeah, roughly. I graduated in 2002.
Yeah, and artificial intelligence wasn't even a buzzword back then. Very few people knew what it was or what capabilities it had. What were they teaching back then about AI 20 years ago?
Well, I think if you look back at the history of computing, it's always been solving an AI problem. And so if you think about Bletchley Park, the solving of codes and breaking of codes is an intelligent problem, and therefore it's an artificial intelligence problem. And if you fast forward that then to when the term artificial intelligence was coined, they were thinking about things like route finding and optimizing route strategies and so on and so forth. And that was an artificial intelligence problem. And now you've got sat nav in your car. And so as we go through, we're coming out of the AI winter now. But as you've gone through, what you've actually seen is you've seen things come from within the AI space in terms of its research and come into the computer science space. Machine learning is another good example that has become more mature now. And so all we're now seeing with these large language models is that's just a maturing of of what is something in AI. And I very, very strongly suspect that whilst this may well be branded AI for quite a long time, it will ultimately just become part of what is computer science and computing.
Yeah, wow, very interesting. And it's now become popular and front of mind for everyone at the minute. So I guess how much AI are you using in your day-to-day?
I'm using it extensively in terms of as an accelerator for what I do. I don't use it to generate thought or independent content. So everything that I'm doing with it, I'm pushing the agenda with it. So we use ChatGPT an awful lot, as I'm sure most of the listeners are probably doing. I use that to enhance my capability. So, instead of me writing a whole ream of stuff, I use ChatGPT to suggest a layout, and then I'll fill in the sections, and I'll edit the sections, and so on and so forth. And it just gives that structure around what you're doing, but it doesn't take away from the human in the loop. And I think that if you look at where technology is going, there's a lot of people who are selling snake oil, frankly, at the moment, around AI can build. Let's let AI build all of your tech stack, or let's get your MVP working. The problem with that is that when the rubber hits the road in 6 months, a year's time, and you need to add more features, or you need to re-architect, or you need to do something that is much more complicated than getting the first idea out the door, we're not capable of. I don't believe that we're in a position to do that yet. Will we be in a year's time? Absolutely, potentially. But I think we need to be very careful with, firstly, what we're saying to our clients and what we're saying out in that space about the capabilities of AI are, because I think it eventually will give potential reputational damage to certain individuals. And I think we need to be very honest about what it is we're actually using it for. I think Microsoft said they were writing something like 20-30% of their code recently with AI, but there's that other 70-80% that they're not, and there's a reason for that. One of my big concerns is what do we do with junior engineers? So, and you'll know this from recruitment, right? I think there will always be a place for very strong, capable technical excellence. If you're using AI to do some of the more junior work, you can't then pull those individuals up through into that technical excellence space. And so unless AI is going to mature into that, then you end up with a deficit. And my concern is that actually, if we rely too much on AI to fill all the junior bits and pieces, where are these people going to come from to fulfill the very technical thinking, the architecture thinking, and so on and so forth that we really need, and we'll still and probably always need in the engineering space.
That's really interesting. How much emphasis would you put on skill and ability to code versus prompt at the minute?
I think prompt engineering is going to be is going to be a very big thing. How to craft it, how to do it. But I think without a doubt, at the moment, it's still in the code, and the capability of the engineers is absolutely paramount. You can get so far with AI, but actually, if you want to make sure you're writing good unit tests and you're making sure that you've got the right security and you've got and so on and so forth, and it's architected for scale, that's very different to just saying, I want you to develop me this feature and I would like this, I want you to integrate with Stripe or whatever it might be. Those two things are completely different, and the output that you're going to get, whilst it will be functional, might be wildly different from what you want. I had an ex-colleague who was showing me something that they'd written, and they'd said, "Well, I want you to always write unit tests, and you've got to run them every time you do the build, and that's all great, but they know more what they're doing." A founder who is non-technical doesn't necessarily understand any of that. So I think I believe very strongly at the moment that there is that massively people will still need to be using software engineers, certainly for the foreseeable future. I could be proved wrong. I've been wrong. I've been wrong before. I've been wrong before. It was around 2003.
Yeah, a long time ago. Yeah, and at the rate it's developing at the minute, there's a new tool coming out. There's some new prompts, some new trained model. It's interesting but scary.
But a lot of these things, when I look at a lot of the tooling, they seem to be a wrapper around something like Claude or something like ChatGPT, and then they've just bolted on maybe an email service, or they've bolted something else onto it. And so actually, realistically, there's a very thin layer of engineering that's gone on top of what is one of the main large language models. So how much innovation is that? I think not a lot. I think that you'll see lots of money flowing into the space, a bit like the .com boom. And I think this will grow faster than the internet grew. So I think it will be bigger than the internet over a period of time. And I think in terms of its revolution for industry, but I think it'll grow much faster than the internet did. But equally, we'll see things just like we did in the .com boom, where people developed stuff that really and truthfully was a waste of time and frankly a waste of their investors' money as well. So we have to be very careful with, if you're looking to invest in is this actually going to make a material difference, or are they selling something that is a bit like the Wizard of Oz?
Yeah, well, those are interesting predictions, and I'm going to be watching this episode back in a few years' time to see if you were right.
Yeah, well, if I'm not right, don't call me back in.
Yeah, definitely not. No episode 2. Going back to your early stages in your career, then you said that your first job was a large company, then you went to a smaller company. I'm always fascinated, particularly in my world, when I'm helping engineers, let's say, for example, come from a larger company to a smaller company, and it's vastly different. I mean, what you're thinking back to some of the larger and smaller ones, what's the main differences in culture and ways of working that people should be aware of if they're looking to change?
I think the nimbleness of a small company is very appealing. You can do a lot more, you can move faster, decisions can be made quicker, and you're not smothered by a layer of for want of a better word, bureaucracy. I happen to like smaller companies, and I like them because you can do more in the organisation, so it becomes a more interesting job. I like the risk. I like the pace of it. So the pace tends to be a little bit faster as well. And I've worked at large companies that say they're fast paced, and having worked in places like the train line in the sort of mid 2000s, they're frankly not fast paced. These people have just been institutionalized to a very large organisation. Then they go to a different organisation that's slightly more fast paced, but it really isn't. I think with a larger organisation, you get a different level of opportunity. So you get the opportunity to take on larger roles, run bigger teams, potentially global teams, and that can be quite appealing. But also, there's a lot of jobs which are quite sort of mundane. You turn up, you do your job, you go home. I've never had the turn up, do my job, go home attitude. And I think that if you want that, then maybe a larger company might be for you. But certainly, I wouldn't recommend you go and join a startup if you want to turn up at 9 and go home at 5 and take your hour for lunch and clock in and clock out, because it doesn't work like that. And it's about rolling up your sleeves, seeing a gap and going and filling it. And for me, as someone who's run various sized teams, those are the people who tend to be the ones that you want to then progress through your organisation, because they're people who are can-do attitude, want to get things done and want to move things forwards.
Yeah. So how did you figure out which company was best suited to you and your personality?
I've worked out, Kieran, that people don't like it when you share your view. Sometimes
In larger companies?
in all sorts of companies, and for right or wrong, they'll ask you your view and they don't necessarily want to hear it. And the difference between what I'm doing now, where you're paid for your view, and you're listened to, and where you're an employee and you're asked your view, I think is quite different. And so I try to find companies when I'm working with them that want to change, that want to move on, that have to go through some sort of transition in order to get themselves to the next level. I mean, it's no surprise the business called ScaleAround. What does it do? It helps you scale and it turns things around. We go through change. We're sort of the agents of change. And for me, the agent of change is really there's almost like an umami about it. That's what really I find really palatable. I like going through the change. Now, my wife will tell you that I hate change being done to me, and there's this bizarre thing where I quite like doing change within organisations, but I don't like being changed. But that's the way it is. I like going through that difficult period, and then once it's back and it's sort of steady as you go, that's then frankly not for me. But you must have found the same. You must have found the same thing in recruitment, right?
About change?
Yeah, and
it's very difficult to manage.
Different size companies, and
it's very, very difficult to manage. So I'm always fascinated by, the different levels of expectations and pace of working in smaller companies to larger companies. Unfortunately, we've seen many people come from larger companies. Think smaller companies, ways of working is for them. It doesn't work out. It's a completely different change. So I'm always fascinated about someone in industry, like how you found it as well. It sounds like there's similarities. Faster way of working, wearing different hats. You can't go home at 5, and you got to start before 9 most times. And it's hard to manage people's expectations when they're looking at something like that, because it looks good from the outside. A startup, that's exciting. I'd love to be part of something bigger. But then they get there and it's early mornings, late nights.
It's scary. It's hairy. Sometimes you don't know whether you're going to have a job like in the coming weeks if the funding round isn't going to hit. I mean, I'm lucky that I'm dealing with these sort of organisations rather than actually being in that particular position myself. But also, yeah, I mean, to your point, if you're not prepared to put the yards in, don't do it, because it's not for you, and there's no shame in that for anyone. Not everyone needs to be an entrepreneur. Not everyone needs to want to go and work in a startup. Not everyone needs to progress to a super level of management. And I think there's quite a lot of stuff around where you've got to do this. You've got to be winning. You've got to be progressing. You've got to and so on and so forth. And the happiest people I know are the people who have said, I'm all right. I don't care, and I'm very happy. You do you. I'm very happy. And I'll turn up. And for some people that's great. And we need those sort of people in industry as well.
Yeah, those are wonderful people. Yeah, who don't need to constantly be pushing. They're happy with the position that they hold. They'll do their responsibilities. They work hard when they're there. They don't need to give anything extra. They don't need to be working in all the hours under the sun. And those people are very vital to any business.
Correct. But they're probably not well suited to a startup.
Definitely.
But you also and when you build that startup team, you need the right blend of personality types. There's no point in getting 4 people who look and think exactly like me in the room, because we won't get it. We won't get anything done, which is why the whole sort of diversity, equality thing becomes really, and inclusivity becomes really important.
Yeah, I think delayed gratification is quite a big one in startups as well, right? Because for 6 months to 2 years, you could be building and building and building. Customers telling you no, constant changes. Is this ever going to change? And all of a sudden, big funding round, you find product market fit, and then it goes off. But for 2 years, you could be doing, banging your head against the wall daily, and that's tough.
It's spinning your wheels, right? But I know businesses that are still going through that. They've got a great business, and they're still going through that phase where the money's a bit tight. We're just going to get to the next bit. And we're just going to get to the next bit, and they will succeed because the grit and determination. And equally, I've met founders where you can see that business is unlikely to succeed, but that person will succeed at some point, and it won't be the first, second, or third, but it might be their fourth business that really takes off and flies. And you've just got to put the yards. The people have just got to put the yards in. I'm founding a business. Okay, I founded ScaleAround, and we're helping lots of people, but it's not easy. And I think founding a product-led business rather than a service-led business is potentially more difficult. But that might just be because it's not something that I would personally want to go and do. But no, it is interesting. I happen to like the services industry, as you do, right?
Same, yeah, definitely, yeah. Going back to your time in QA, we've spoken off camera and a couple of times about people who go into QA sometimes don't break out of QA. It's very difficult to move out of that box. So why did you go into QA, and then also how did you break out?
So my first job was I was building a weapons platform for the British Army with a company called Logica, who actually I know more. I think they're part of CGI now. And I started in QA. I did a few months in QA, and then I worked in software development. I did some ADA95 and C++, and I was not the best engineer. I was distinctly average, but I was very good on the QA side of things in terms of identifying defects, understanding how the QA theory worked in terms of test case development, and so on and so forth. And I wanted a career in management, and my view was, I'm better at that stuff than I am at this stuff. Therefore, I'll go and work in QA and get myself a career in management, which turned out to be quite successful. So within 3 or 4 years, I was QA manager at the train line in its sort of mid-growth phase. I progressed to director of QA at a company called Market, which is now part of Standard & Poor's by the time I was 30. And that was really good. The problem is that very few people are going to take the QA guy and make them the CTO or make them the engineer, the director of engineering. And for that, you've got to get lucky. And I got lucky at 118 or KGB Group in that my boss became the COO, and he said to have 118 Money, and he said, "Can I help look after the software development as well as the QA?" And that then maneuvered me outside of the QA sphere into something else. But it probably took me a good 8 years, so 10 years to get to director at Market, and then another 8 years to get out of being a sort of global QA director, to maneuver myself into the next sphere. And that's tricky. So when you plan, if I'd have done something different, I probably would have persevered a little bit more with the software engineering side, because I think that there's more opportunity in there for you to push yourself through the levels. So it's a slower burn at the early stage of the career, and then push faster in the sort of mid phase. Yeah. But that's what you live and learn, right?
Yeah. So I'm not saying I agree or disagree, but I'm curious. So why wouldn't someone or a company even promote a head of QA to CTO? Why would a head of software engineering be progressed first before QA?
I think there's a view that they understand there's a deeper technical understanding in software engineering than there is in QA. And there are an awful lot, when I say this, there's an awful lot of extremely good quality assurance people out there. But the truth of it is that there's a lot of quality assurance people who are not particularly good, and they have very identical CVs, and it becomes very difficult. And you'll know this from you know this already, right? From recruiting, it's very difficult to find a really good QA. And so the opportunity therefore, and is to progress out is quite difficult, because it's difficult to sell. It's difficult to prove that you understand things. In my personal capability is around people, process, and how you get a really slick, heartbeat out of your software engineering function. I don't particularly do architecture. I don't particularly do anything around sort of software engineering. I understand all the code metrics. I understand exactly what we should be doing. But I might bring in an associate to do the architecture. I might bring in an associate to do some of the other pieces of work that we might need doing. But I'm much more about how do we get the machine running at a really good heartbeat and pushing things out. To your question, why not? Why do QA people know? I don't know, Kieran. The truth is, I genuinely don't know. I know some extremely good technical QAs, and they do progress. But I think unless you've got something outside of, I can write some test cases and generate some defects, you're not going to really progress and push through. You've got to take an interest technically in it. You've got to take an interest in the product, and you need to take a wider remit. So my view on quality was always that it wasn't about testing the quality in. It wasn't about just doing the software testing, but it was about the whole life cycle, from what somebody used to describe to me as flash to bang, getting the idea to actually putting it into production and trying to strip quality all the way through and into each one of those processes. If you do that, then you can become truly T-shaped across software engineering, as opposed to T-shaped within quality assurance. Does that make sense? Because all the best leaders tend to end up being T-shaped, where they understand part of the business horizontally, but they've got one deep part of expertise. Now, I'm fortunate in that over the last 4 or 5 years, I've managed to understand much wider parts of the business, which enables me to take on interim CEO roles and other bits and pieces. But my depth now is in technology, but the breadth of it straddles across. And so, because I think quality assurance sometimes, in terms of the departments, seems subordinate to software engineers, so you need to test this and you need to do this, and you see that a lot. That then doesn't put the quality assurance engineers on the same level as the software engineers, and therefore they always seem to be slightly subordinate. And I suspect the same is true, right, of support and other areas of the business, where the opportunity just doesn't arise because of the structure that people have put in place, which is sad, really.
Let's imagine someone's watching this, they're a QA 4 years into their career, for example, and maybe what you said has resonated. I imagine one answer might be, look at different areas of the business to become T-shaped. Is there anything else you might be able to advise someone who's thinking, can't hit my ceiling in QA, I don't see the progression, I want an alternative? What would be a logical next step now that you've come out on the other side of that? Yeah,
I think one of the really good things I did was understand the process of building good software. So not just the process of testing really well, but the process of building it. So the Scrum process, your agile process is lean, all of that stuff. And I read a lot. I remember at the time I was reading a lot. I was reading blogs. I was engaging in the community, in the QA community. I was engaging in the wider agile community, as in sort of late 2000s, and that starts to get you thinking around other areas and putting different, what someone described to me as putting a different lens on and looking at a problem from a slightly different angle. So the more lenses you can get in your arsenal, the more different angles you can start looking at a problem from, the more you can assist your organization and add value. And what you want to try and do is become someone who can add value, not just in the quality, but across much more of the space. And the way you do that is you expand your knowledge, and then you try to apply that knowledge expansion to things. You'll get it wrong, right? And getting it wrong is the best thing you can do, because that means that you can learn from it. But fundamentally, you need to understand more, develop your knowledge, and then try to apply it, and not be afraid of making a mistake.
I really like that, the lens perspective. I do that in recruitment, but maybe haven't called it changing lenses. Do I need to look at it from a recruitment perspective, from a human perspective, from a psychology perspective, from a business perspective? And you look at different situations with different lenses, and that makes perfect sense to think, if you're in a business as a QA manager, for example, and you don't understand how software look at problems or product look at problems, you're going to be at a disadvantage.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, yeah, I think I was quite. What was advantageous about my career was I had done some software engineering, and I'd written unit tests, where we'd written assert true at the end of them, just so we could get the line coverage up, and all those terrible things. And you can start to smell what people are saying to you, because you've been and done a bit of that, and I'd been and done a little bit of Scrum mastering, a little bit of product ownership, and by trying to dip your toe in and help out, you can learn an awful lot more. So, but it's about getting outside your comfort zone, doing something new. A bit like this podcast. This is my first podcast I've done. Do something new. Try something. You don't know what's going to come from it, and I think that's really key. A bit like when I started my consultancy. A bit like when you started Place. I'm sure do something new. What's the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is you get told to potentially get back in your box a little bit, and then you need to make an evaluation on, well, why did that happen? What can I learn? Let's find another path, and potentially find the right organisation for you to develop in, because not every, as we spoke about earlier, not every organisation is going to be the same, and or suit everyone.
I didn't realise it was your first ever podcast. I'm so grateful.
It is. So grateful. It is my first ever podcast.
Yeah, and you're doing so well.
Thank you.
Giving out loads of information. Let's go back to when you had your first ever promotion. I know there's lots of people who are early on in their career who have taken some insightful stuff from other guests, particularly around leadership. So, like, what characteristics and attributes will you display in to achieve a promotion outside of just doing the work?
I think, my first promotion was because I changed jobs and took a promotion by changing jobs, right? So there's a couple of ways you can do it. You can do that, which is, I think I'm due a promotion. I'm kind of not moving forward fast enough here. Therefore, I'm gonna move organisation, and that's quite an extreme thing to go and do.
Quite common though.
It is common, and I think it's probably the fastest for me. It was the fastest way of progressing my career in its early stages, was to take hops that way. Internally, what did I do? I started looking at what my boss was doing and taking things off them and being helpful, because that's always useful. So you need to look at where are the pain points, and how can I address them, and how can I show willing to address them, and how can I demonstrate that I'm moving something forwards. So find a problem that's a material problem, and then start addressing it. And I think the problem that they had was that they were expanding quite quickly, and they didn't have anyone looking after the QA department, and they needed to put some more QAs in. And so I started going across to the other team where they did have one, and trying to provide some advice and support to what was effectively my peer at the time. And by doing that, you naturally maneuver yourself into a leadership position, which is useful, and also make friends with your boss.
That always helps.
Yeah, or not. Don't not make friends with them. But if you can make friends in the workplace, I think that can help, because it's like everything. It's a relationship. It's a relationship game. Someone said to me not so long ago, the whole thing's a game, and once you realise the whole thing's a game, it all feels much better.
You play much differently.
You do play a little bit differently, but I'm not entirely convinced that's a sort of perfect analogy. But you do play slightly differently once you realise that it's all just one big game.
Mm. I like what you said there about there's two ways of looking at it, right? And I think you've taken the approach that I did earlier on in my career, where you can make friends with your boss, which is always helpful, but be seen to be doing extra things and taking some problems from people above you to make their lives easier, which ultimately means you take on more responsibility. What other people I've seen don't do is they don't do that because they haven't had the promotion yet. So I'm not taking more responsibility because I need a promotion to do that. Whereas what you've done and what I've done, I think, in my career is I've done extra, which allows you to take on that promotion because you're already doing the tasks.
Yeah, well, it does two things. It frees your boss's time up so they can go and do more stuff, which means that they can then elevate themselves, which creates a gap for you to naturally move into, or it gives you that wider understanding that we were talking about earlier, which means that you can then say, well, I'm doing all this stuff here, and that is this sort of job, and therefore I can go and I can apply for my I can apply somewhere else for my next promotion if it doesn't become available here. And so you can open that gap up or rather close your capability gap between you and the next level just by saying, I'd like to do more. I think there's a problem here. Can I help you solve it? What's the biggest thing that I can do to make your life easier?
It's a win-win.
Absolutely it is. And is it more work? I've not ever found it's more work, surprisingly, either. Because some of the work that you've got, you can maneuver, you can sort of allow other people to take on because that gives them an opportunity. That first step, you can't really provide your work to someone else. You have to take it. But as you grow within an organisation, you can provide more opportunity to people who are working for you by taking on things, and therefore that gives you the opportunity to take on things because you've got more space. The trick is not to take on too much stuff because you end up with hit your cognitive load, right? And then you crumble.
I'm sure we can probably both agree that throughout like a career you experience self-doubt or imposter syndrome. Like what was that? When was the step up that you had? Was throughout your career where you were like, well, this is a big step up. You know, maybe I'm not sure if I'm capable of this, or I'm now in the big leagues.
I think my first CTO job was a little bit of that. And I remember talking to someone at the time about it and saying, I feel like I've got a bit of imposter syndrome here. And they said, why on earth would you think that? Look at what you've done. You've done this, done this. You've absolutely got this. And it was that little pep talk that just sort of shook me a bit. And frankly, having a good, my wife is extremely supportive as well. And having someone at home that can sort of talk to you honestly. I think it was Tony Blair said once. He said, "There's two people that you, as Prime Minister, he said there's two people you can say your mind to. One is your wife, and one is the Queen. Well, I don't have the Queen, or the King, but I do have my wife. And I think that's true actually of nearly any organisation that you're working in. The only person you can really tell the truth to is someone who's not working in that organisation, and probably your partner at home."
Yeah. So you mentioned CTO there. I know you've held management positions and then senior leadership positions like CTO. I think you had an interim CEO position at one point.
Yeah, I'm still doing CEO.
What's the main differences between a senior manager, for example, head of QA, or let's say head of software engineering, and then when you step up into CTO? Like, what are the key difference and responsibilities that you'd be doing?
I think you're thinking more strategically, and for me, there's two types of CTO. There's a hands-on CTO who really wants to roll their sleeves up and be in the code, and there's a strategic CTO, and there's every color of the spectrum in between, right? There's all sorts of shades of grey in between that. I'm much more on the strategic side. The difference is it's like a wave. So if you can imagine a wave. Everyone in your team is in the middle of that wave and being pulled and sucked into it as they try and work and get stuff done and so on and so forth. Your job as a leader at an executive level is to sit in front of that wave and work out what's coming next, and to sit behind that wave and mop up all the stuff that's fallen out and make sure that the ship is still running and steady. And for me, you're moving from within the top of that wave down and out either side of it as you move up in your career.
So bigger, higher level decisions rather than day-to-day decisions. You might be looking at more month-to-month decisions.
You're still looking at day-to-day decisions. I mean, I came off a call just before I came out where we were talking about a problem with a product feature, and it needs to be fixed. And when are we going to fix it? And so on, and we needed to go back to the client there and then. So. You're still involved in the day-to-day, but it's about dealing with the escalations, and the escalations can become tougher decisions to make. So it's not about not being involved in the day-to-day. It's the scale of decision and the impact of the decision that is the difference because if you make a decision wrong that's much higher impact, then it has a much bigger blast radius in terms of the potential for it to go wrong. And so you're right in that you're thinking much further. You're potentially thinking much further out, but you're also taking decisions on a day-to-day basis that have potentially much bigger impact.
It's a really good point. Yeah, really good point. So ScaleAround, when did you start the business?
2 years ago.
2 years ago. Congratulations.
2 years ago this month.
Nice, congratulations. So let's talk about the process before setting up ScaleAround. Like, what was your last employed position, and when did the seed get planted? Like, actually, I want to go on my own. I want to set up my consulting business, and I think I've got this.
I've always wanted to do something on my own, Kieran, and I was in a role, and it had naturally come to an end. And there'd been a divestment, and it wasn't the role really that I'd taken when I signed up to do it. And I remember having a long conversation with my wife again about it, and she said something along the lines of, "You keep talking about it, but you're never doing it. Why don't you just you don't find it difficult to find a job? Why don't you just get on and do it? And if it doesn't work out, we'll be all right." And so the seed was planted, and I was very lucky at the time that I'd been offered effectively, my first client, and indeed our largest client. And I'd taken a full-time job, and she said, "Why have you?" And I said, and I remember turning around to my wife and said, "This is just everything that I don't like." Again, it's not that I don't like it, but it's everything that just isn't really doing it for me anymore.
You're trying to get away from
that. Everything I get away from, I've just stepped back into it again. It's exactly that. I've just stepped back into it again. And she said, "Well, I don't know why you didn't do what I told you to do." And so I said, "You know what? I've got to go and do it, haven't I?" And she said, "That's exactly what you've got to go and do. But it's like an itch, because otherwise I'll get to 65, 67, 68, maybe 70, depending on what the government do, and I'll never have done it."
That what if moment.
Yeah, it is that what if, and I don't want to be laying there on my when the time comes, going, I wish I'd done X, Y, and Z when I had the opportunity. And I think that when something presents itself, you have to take it. And I had the opportunity, and I was going to kick myself if I didn't do it. And we went for it. 2 years on, it's the best decision I've ever made. I love working and helping people. We have a small associate network that helps companies, and I'm still working for our largest client as well. But and I've been lucky enough to pick up some board advisory work as well, which is really great. It's just been completely different, and exactly what I needed at that point in my career.
Good. Same for me, really. Setting up was such a big thing. It turns out to be the best thing I've ever done, and I couldn't imagine how well it's gone. It was beyond what I could imagine, really, and it's still happening. So I share those feelings. It's a nice feeling to know that it's worked out.
Yeah, I mean, I always worry what happens if this happens, and what happens if that happens, and I think that's just my natural anxiety. But I've learned over the years to sort of try and keep that in check. And I have had mental health issues, as lots of people have. And it's this, but actually going on my own and proving that I can do it has really helped with that. If that makes that, it's kind of weird, because you'd think you're more anxious over it, but actually it's given me more confidence, more stability, and yeah, I mean, like you, I'm sure you have no intention of going to work for someone else again.
Hopefully not.
No.
Hopefully not anytime soon. But you always have those what if, thinking what could go wrong moments. And it's interesting because, we're on episode 16, 17 now.
And 17, you said
17, 17, yeah, that's a long time ago. Episode 17, and every single person I've spoken to has had some big things happen to them in their career. Some people had multiple redundancies, and they're so grateful they happened because everything turned out the way it was meant to. And they started that business, or they started that consultancy. But at the time, it's the biggest thing in the world. And when you look back, it just gives me more confidence to think in the day-to-day, when there's a big problem, You can look at it, this is meant to be happening. This is a test. I have a problem here to solve, rather than this is the end of the world.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And I've been made redundant. I've lost my job. Lots of stuff happens, right, that you don't expect, and it gives you an opportunity. When you're in it, you don't necessarily realize it. But I think you have to look at everything. Every time something unexpected comes along, you have to look at it and say, what's the opportunity here for me, and my family, and what do I want out of life? I read a really good book on interviews. I shan't advertise it on your podcast, but I'll tell you about it later. But I read a really good book on interviews, and one of the first things it says about finding a job is list out all the things you want from your next job, or for your next career move. And I think it's a really important thing to go and do. And I remember at the time when I was reading it, I was thinking about moving on. I did make a list of all the stuff that I wanted out of my next move, and what was meaningful for me. What did the office space need to look like? What sort of colleagues did I want? What was my boss like? All these different things, and it just helped sharpen that final decision. Just writing it down, and I had a checklist. I sat there and I checked off things off the checklist, and some jobs I actually pulled myself out of the interview for because I realised that they weren't going to be where I needed to be. That was several jobs ago. I won't say how many because you'd be able to work out. But it was several jobs ago. But I think that is a very logical thing to do, because it starts to talk about risk. It starts to understand the risk of moving here compared to moving here. And it's not always about money. And if you make it all about money when you're talking about your career, I genuinely think that's a mistake. I have done it. I've done moves for money.
We all have.
Right, we all have, because it's important and it makes the world go round. But the bottom line is the difference between a few £1,000s here and there is not. It should be neither here nor there compared to all the other things that potentially could be on your list. And so, making a list, calculating your risk based on what you want and what you're trying to get and what you're trying to achieve, I think is really quite important. And you can do the same with your business as well.
Great idea. Writing it down, getting out of the head and seeing it in writing, what's important to me. And then you can make your assessments from there.
Exactly that.
Good. ScaleAround. So I'm a business. Let's imagine again. I am looking at tech upgrades, a transformation, or I'm clueless in tech. So why would someone invite you in as ScaleAround? What would you do for a business?
So what we do at ScaleAround is we look at we do several things. So what we don't do software engineering, although maybe at some point. But we won't come in and put software engineers in. We won't augment the team particularly. We provide high quality executive assistance, and that might be to solve a small problem. It might be to solve on a longer term basis, because you need someone in your organisation to help you run a department on a longer term basis, because you don't have the expertise in house, or you don't want to go and hire someone immediately in a full time basis. So we do everything from. Let me give you an example. So we had a company come to us and they said, "Can you do an assessment of our department? We don't have anyone in that department. We know that that we need someone. Can you help us out?" So we did a maturity assessment on the department from, right the way, like I'll say it again, from the flash to bang, from getting the idea to putting it in. Where would that technology function sit? In fact, it was quality assurance. So where would quality assurance sit in that, and then assess each part of that process, and then provide. I think we provided something like 68, 70 recommendations. Which ones can you do yourselves? How difficult are they to do? How would you go about doing them? And then then they decided they wanted to go and hire someone. So we helped them draft the job specification. And a few months went by, and they phoned us back up and they said, "We don't have anyone to do the technical interviews." And so we then got an associate in to come and do the technical interviews. And that's a very successful engagement. We've come in, helped you build, we've helped you set the foundations of your department. We've helped you understand where you are at the moment, what you're doing good, what you're not doing quite so well, and we've put you on that curve for success. And we shake hands and we say thanks very much. Other engagements are longer term. So I'm working with a client where we're effectively running their business for them as interim chief executive, and frankly that's all my time, and it's a really exciting thing. So we've taken them from having a product that wasn't quite ready for market to putting it into the market to building out a sales team. How do we expand out various other parts of the organization, support, how do we expand engineering, put the quality assurance team in, build out new product, and so on and so forth. So we've really helped take them on a journey where we don't quite have a product that's ready for market, but we need to get it to market because we want to be selling it because we need some revenue to driving that revenue growth, and that's been a really great engagement. And what we're doing at the moment, we're building out maturity assessments. So a maturity assessment around, funnily enough, AI, a maturity assessment around your software engineering, a maturity assessment around your product, and then we can use those to come in, look at what you're doing, provide you with where we think you're at and what you need to do in order to move on a scale. Other engagements that we do are things like where you need technology and you're not a technical founder and you don't have a technical co-founder. We can come in and we can augment the team there. So maybe a day a month or a couple of days a week. We can build out potential product roadmap. We can then give you a resource model. We can give you different resource models. Maybe you blend it with some offshore, and we have an offshore provider that's extremely competent. And we can look at blended models and how the resource models would stack up, what the cost is over the next year, 2 years, if you were to look to grow out your engineering team, and that will then help you financially manage it, and then will help you potentially build out that engineering team as well, which really helps people on that growth. But they don't then have to spend the six figures on a permanent CTO, because they can take an associate from ScaleAround, and all the associates typically are people that I've worked with in the past that are want to do work, but they don't necessarily want to be doing 100% day job anymore, because they're at the point in their career where that doesn't necessarily work for them. So you can get access to extremely competent, capable individuals who've got a long history of delivery and excellence technically, who you wouldn't normally be able to afford, and we can put that in place for you, and we'll help you solve problems then as you go forward. And that typically works off of contract wise. It can be as little as a day a month, and or it can be an assessment, and that's a fixed price normally with an assessment. But then we have a network of companies as well that we work with, partner companies that we work with, where we can say, do you need an information security audit? You really should go and use these guys because they know what they're doing. And again, they're companies or people that we've worked with in the past that we trust, that we know the quality of the work is going to be good. So you're not just getting a contractor, which is obviously you provide. What you're getting is that knowledge, that network of this is competent. This will really work. We've seen that before. We need to go to this guy because that's the right person for you. So we really try to tailor the model so that it works for you as an organization, as opposed to just putting in a contractor who you don't necessarily know is going to work out.
Yeah, loads of value add from you and the consultancy then. Different stages, different products, I guess, different avenues to go down. Like, what's the big differentiator? I'm sure you just covered a few there, but why would someone come to ScaleAround and not to someone else? Because I imagine there's some competition in your market.
There is competition, and we're not for everyone. If you want someone who is deeply technical in the weeds of your code, that's not us. If you want strategic engineering leadership to take you from one stage to the next, and you're a reasonably small sized company, then absolutely come to us. So we're playing in the startup VC space. We're not particularly in the private equity space, and we're helping these companies just go from here to here. A trusted ear to the chief executive sometimes. There's a company I'm working with at the moment that really just needs some guidance on the technical side, but also we provide the trusted ear to the chief exec. So that ability to straddle things and not worry, not be too bounded, is really quite important for us. And we want to add value. So at the point we're not adding value, that's the point we're going to raise our hands and say, you need something else now, because it's not in our interest. It doesn't excite me not to add value. It doesn't excite me to just run a contract because it happens to be there, and we've not got funders that we need to particularly keep interested in revenue. It's about doing the right thing, not doing anything, if that makes sense.
Definitely. Yeah, always adding value. You've always got to be seen to be adding value, and people appreciate that. And if you might take the same approach as we do, if we're not the right fit, because we're not going to be the right fit for everyone, we'll happily say that. And we might introduce them to someone, or you might just say, look, it's not best for both parties. Yeah. I think that's the best way.
That's exactly it. If we're not adding value, thanks for nothing. And equally, if we feel that we're not being listened to as a client, or you as a client are not getting the value because you're not listening to the advice, we're also out. So we're very happy to help, but if we believe that you're spending your money and not then taking the advice and so on and so forth, it's not working for you, and we'll call it, because there's just no point in that. And we might even advise to someone else, and I have passed work to other people that are a better fit. And funnily enough, they then come back round and ask you for more help later on. It's funny how things work. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I've really enjoyed today, but I think I'm also curious to know what's on the roadmap for the next 6 months. I'm 2 years in. You've still got that excitement. I can see it. I've got it as well. The next 6 months, is there anything you're going to be doing differently, or is it more of the same? Looking after people and added value.
It's more of the same. Every now and again, I toy with, do we bring in some software engineers, and do I start an engineering house? But the truth is, at the moment, I think that potentially detracts from what we're really trying to do. Very excited to be on the mentorship program for FinTech Wales. So I'll be helping out their fourth cohort as they go through the foundry there, and try and add value. And that's obviously that's a freebie from ScaleAround, trying to help the ecosystem in Wales. We touched on it briefly, that I moved from having a job in London into Wales, and I knew no one when I arrived. I'm very keen to try to help people make that move. But the trajectory that the country of Wales has been on since I moved here 10 years ago is just enormous. I mean, it's night and day in terms of the startup scene in Wales. I think it's truly excellent, and we're very keen to be seen as a Welsh business, proudly a Welsh business. I joke with people that if I'd have moved to another country, I probably would have got citizenship by now. But the truth of it is that we are proud to be based in Wales, and we do want to help Welsh startups and the Welsh ecosystem. And so I'm very keen that we are seen to be progressing that as well over the next 6 months.
Good. Well, I've really enjoyed the conversation today, and thank you very much for coming on and spending your time with me this afternoon.
Thanks, Kieran. I've really enjoyed it, and I'm going to enjoy my electrolytes and water bottle
whilst reading the book.
Whilst starting my recruitment company, which is what we're actually now going to go and do.
Nice, absolute pleasure. Thanks, Oliver.
Thanks, Kieran.
And that's the end of the episode of Oliver Smith. What an impactful conversation with lots to take away from his 20 years experience in the tech industry. Please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and we look forward to seeing you next time for our interview with James Smith.